Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Vince Coglianese.
Good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Andy Biggs is with us at 4:30 today. He's on the Oversight Committee and, of course, a member of Congress. We'll talk about all of the stories that involve him this week, including that big spending bill fight that's going on right now and the impeachment inquiry beginning yesterday. Mike Van Meter is here at 5 o'clock. He's a candidate for Virginia State Senate in the 33rd District. We'll talk about his very important race. And E.J. Antoni joins us at 5:30. We talk the economy with him and what this spending fight means for our economy. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We have a lot of stories to get to today, including the death of California Senator Dianne Feinstein, who has, of course, been in failing health in a very public way for some time now. We get the notification this morning that she has passed away, and there really was no delay whatsoever. Democrats are sprinting as quickly as they can to take advantage of her death in order to advance their power. There's a lot of debate about what comes next. Right now, Gavin Newsom is the man with the plan. He has made promises that he's going to pick a black woman to hold the seat, and none of those people that he will choose from will be current primary contestants. There are a lot of people that are trying to run for that seat right now who have already been salivating at the opportunity to take it from Dianne Feinstein. And but none of them will be among the people that he appoints. At least that's his claim. We'll see. You know, he's a Democrat. No clear indication whether or not he's going to stick to this promise. But obviously, what's the thing that jumps to mind? Black woman, presumably a Californian, and somebody who's not currently running in the primary. Who could he pick? Who could he pick? Speculation running wild today that he could choose Kamala Harris to be the next U.S. Senator from California. And that would take care of a number of problems, wouldn't it? It would get rid of her as vice president of the United States, which is a huge problem for the Democrats. She is deeply unpopular. Just shuffle her off back to the United States Senate. And it would also allow that vice presidential position to pop open, wouldn't it? And who might want that job? Well, I got to say, and look, I realize this is all hypothetical, but I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, man, could it be more perfect for Gavin Newsom? Gavin Newsom does a trade out, right? Coordinates with the Democrats here, puts Kamala Harris in as the senator from California. Gavin Newsom leaps into the vice presidential seat, and then Joe Biden, by the end of the year or so, decides, you know, this whole president thing, I probably shouldn't do it anymore, and steps aside, and Gavin Newsom becomes president of the United States, and you and I don't get to have a vote on that subject? Anything could happen. These Democrats, they love devising all sorts of strategies around stuff like this. You have, just to give you a sense of what Gavin Newsom has been saying on this subject, he's been asked, because nobody can resist, he's been asked over and over what he would do should Dianne Feinstein vacate her seat for some reason. Here is the answer. This is just a couple weeks ago with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. Take a listen.
The senior senator here her daughter apparently has power of attorney. She, as an elected official, has power of attorney over 40 million people's representation in Washington, D.C. Why should she still be serving as a senator?
Well, I leave it to her. I told you I'm the most subjective human being in the world on this topic. I have no objectivity whatsoever. I've known Dianne Feinstein since I was a kid. I interned with her in college, still have a signed book from my days when she was mayor. So
more like family to you.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm the last person to ask.
This has been sad to watch.
Yeah.
Look, this is somebody who's...
Listen to how friendly this is, by the way. Just that Chuck Todd's like, you know, part of the family. It's just part of the family. Just one of us. Dianne Feinstein and Chuck Todd and Gavin Newsom, all the same club.
Obituary, legacy is I fear people are going to forget because of what we're watching here at the end.
But I'll tell you, I mean, it wasn't
Look at how ghoulish they are. They're already talking about obits. She wasn't even dead yet when they did this interview.
long ago where she would call me up, read me the Riot Act on issues related to forest management, vegetation management, what we're doing in the Central Valley on drought and water issues. Again, that wasn't the black and white movie days. That was not too long ago. Her staff is still extraordinarily active. And we wish her only the best. Her term expires. She's not running for re-election. So that, this time next year, we'll be in a very different place.
Is it fair? Do you feel as if the staff is fulfilling, can do the duties?
Yes. I don't think it. I know it. We're working extraordinarily closely
You don't
together.
feel as if the state's losing out by not having a more active voice?
Don't you love Gavin Newsom, by the way? He defended all of this. He's like, yeah, it's totally fine for an elected member of Congress not to be able to do their job. Just let the staff do it. Such a Democrat answer. Let the bureaucrats run things. Let the unelected people in our government wield control over us.
Missing town halls or more active. But, Senator Padilla was just in the office a few days ago. We were comparing and contrasting issues and advocacy, and we're aligned with Feinstein in her office.
Sounds like you hope you don't have to make another appointment.
No, I don't want to make another appointment. I don't think the people of California want me to make another appointment.
Because you'd end up appointing both seats. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that's, that said, it's my job, it's my responsibility. If we have to do it, we'll do it.
So humble.
You're going to abide by your pledge?
Yeah, interim appointment. I don't want to get involved in the primary.
So no, you would not appoint anybody that is filed for this
race. It would
race?
be completely unfair to the Democrats that have worked their tail off. That primary is just a matter of months away. I don't want to tip the balance of that.
But you're going to abide by, it would be essentially a caretaker, an African-American woman.
We hope we never have to make this decision, but I abide by what I've said very publicly on a consistent basis, yes.
Yes. Okay, so let me play the predicate to this. So what they're talking about is that he had earlier made a pledge that it will be a black woman who replaces Dianne Feinstein when she leaves the seat under any circumstance whatsoever, including her death, as we've discovered today. So here is the audio of that. This is when Gavin Newsom made a promise to Joy Reid. This is her on MSNBC. This is 2 years ago. Joy Reid, Gavin Newsom.
Tom, I have to go to a break, but this is a yes or no answer that you could give me. If, in fact, Dianne Feinstein were to retire, will you nominate an African-American woman to restore the seat that Kamala Harris is no longer in the United States Senate? And do you have a name in mind?
I have multiple names in mind.
By the way, isn't it amazing? Isn't it just amazing how wedded to racial politics these guys are? They're so wedded to it, they don't even recognize how sinful that framing is. Like, oh, we should pick somebody on the basis of their skin color. Like, just the idea that racial prejudice would be the basis for someone to join the United States Senate. So casually talking about it. Joy Reid still has a television show. Like, you don't get canceled for that kind of racial prejudice. No, it's totally fine. Are you going to pick someone? Because Kamala Harris was a black woman, so obviously now we need a black woman. That's the way this works. So are you going to pledge to fulfill the promise of racial prejudice?
And do you have a name in mind?
I have multiple names in mind. We have multiple names in mind, and the answer is yes.
Okay. Governor Gavin Newsom, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, Governor Gavin Newsom, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for aligning yourself with my racial agenda. Ooh, just grotesque, huh? Not to mention sexual agenda. It's got to be a woman. What kind of woman? Can it be a man who is a woman? Who says he's a woman? Is that okay? Sure, whatever. I wonder what Joy Reid would think if Gavin Newsom were to appoint a black man who says he was a woman. That says, what would happen? Does RuPaul live in California? Is RuPaul eligible for this? Yeah, all right. So that's the plan. And so, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Kamala? Could it be? A bunch of statements today from members of the Senate lamenting the passing of Dianne Feinstein. Here is Chuck Schumer today with some remarks. Notice, it is interesting to hear the some of the tone, because you talk about how insular Washington is Like Schumer's position on this is like one of his closest friends. These are the people he actually cares about.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Madam President, first woman President pro tem of the United States Senate. Earlier this morning, we lost a giant in the Senate. Senator Dianne Feinstein was one of the most amazing people who ever graced the Senate, who ever graced the country. She had so many amazing, wonderful qualities wrapped up in one incredible human being. She was smart. She was strong. She was brave. She was compassionate. But maybe the trait that stood out most of all was her amazing integrity.
Oh my
Her
God.
integrity was a diamond.
Do you know how? I mean, think about how she tried to destroy Brett Kavanaugh. The role that she played in advancing just the most scurrilous, destructive, defamatory lies about a good man who was nominated to join the United States Supreme Court. That was Dianne Feinstein. Like, stop with the integrity thing. Also, the media has been running around today saying, oh, she was such a moderate and she was so conservative and she voted with conservatives. Like, the whole thing was crazy. Like, really? Because by my count, she supported every baby death bill that ever came in front of her. That was always her position. What do you mean she was conservative? It's like they operate from this alternate universe that doesn't in any way meaningfully reflect reality. Now, that said, Dianne Feinstein, in my view, Dianne Feinstein's record wasn't all awful. There were good moments. Do you remember when Dianne Feinstein was confronted by, I think they're called the Sunshine Children? And somebody, basically the left had put together these kids to come and try and browbeat Dianne Feinstein into submission to pass some sort of, Green New Deal type bill. And so a group of children enter her office and they start screaming at her about how she has to save the climate. It's true. You have to save the climate, as if Dianne Feinstein could change the weather. Listen to the interaction she had with them. This is actually legendary.
Ask you to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We have our own Green New Deal.
Some scientists have said that we have 12 years to turn this around.
Well, it's not going to get turned around in 10 years. What we can do,
Senator, if this doesn't get turned around in 10 years, you're looking at the faces of the people who are going to be living with these consequences.
The government is supposed to be for the people and by the people and
Oh my God.
you know what's interesting about this group is I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing. You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway. I don't respond to that. I've gotten elected. I just ran. I was elected by almost 1 million vote plurality.
By the way, she's like, her arms are crossed in this video, and she's staring at them like a school teacher, scolding the children.
And I know what I'm doing. So, maybe people should listen a little bit.
I hear what you're saying, but we're the people who voted you. You're supposed to listen to us. That's your,
How old are you?
job.
How old
I'm
are you?
16. I
Well,
can't
you didn't vote.
I hear what you're saying, but we're the people who voted for you. Dianne Feinstein. For once, I love this. A follow-up question. Well, how old are you? She said, I'm 16. I can't vote. Well, you didn't vote for me, said Dianne Feinstein. What are you talking about?
You're supposed to listen to us. That's your,
How old are you?
job.
How old
I'm
are you?
16. I
Well,
can't
you didn't vote for me.
Well, I'm 24.
It doesn't matter. We're the ones who's going to be
Words mean
impacted.
something.
It doesn't matter. We're going to be the ones who are impacted.
I understand that. I have 7 grandchildren. I understand it very well.
Also, the reality here is that the Democrats did create this. They created a world where you can lead children delusionally into believing that the weather is going to kill them at any moment. and that the only answer to it is that they need to link arms and scream at senators.
Senator, the cost of not taking this action is far higher than the cost of what the Green New Deal will be.
This is like the chaperone lady who's with the kids.
And there is enormous popularity for this bill around the whole country. And we're asking you to be brave and do this for us and for your grandchildren.
Of course, the irony of all of this, as you know, is that if they were to pass a more aggressive, quote, climate agenda, much of it was done in the Inflation Reduction Act, which wasn't actually about reducing inflation, it would hurt these children, and it would hurt their futures. And if God were to bless them with children and grandchildren, it would hurt them too. This is destructive to humanity. It doesn't help.
Get enough for everyone. I'm trying to do the best I can, which was to write a responsible resolution.
Any plan that doesn't take bold, transformative action is not going to be what we need.
Well, you know better than I do. So I think one day you should run for the Senate.
Yeah.
And then you do it your way.
But by that time,
in the meantime,
there's going to be a big problem.
I just won a big election.
Oh, my goodness. Great moments in American history. Just ridiculous. That's what the Democrats created, and then Dianne Feinstein scolded them. 3:22 now.
Cool content from your favorite WMAL shows. Download the new WMAL app today.
All right, let's go to the phones. Mike calling in from Gainesville, Virginia on line 1. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince Coglianese.
Hello, Mike. What's on your mind, sir?
I can understand why they want to get Kamala out of the vice presidency and into the Senate, even though she's currently the president of the Senate.
Right.
But I don't see how anybody in the Republican Party is going to vote to fill that vacancy for the Democrats with somebody like Gavin Newsom. That's just not going to happen, I don't think.
The vice presidency, yes. So the pattern for how you replace a vice president is you need a majority vote in the Senate and the House. So your point is that they would never, I don't know. See, these House Republicans, you feel like you can trust them on this question? I don't know what the answer is here, because at some point I would assume that they're going to say, well, we've got to give him somebody.
No, you don't. You don't have to fill the vacancy. You have a line of succession. We have the Speaker of the House is Republican, supposedly, in McCarthy. So why would we give them another Democrat to be in the way? Especially
no, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm just saying, I'm talking about what's likely to happen with these House members. And boy, the likeliness of them folding seems high. But you're right about that. It does require the Republican majority in the House to endorse whoever it is that Joe Biden would pick as a replacement. So, or whoever the Democrats pick as a replacement for Joe Biden. So, yes, there is a meaningful speed bump to Gavin Newsom's rise to power. Thank you, Mike. It's a good reminder. It's just remarkable. Speaking of those Republicans, they're not even capable of getting on the same page on spending. A temporary spending bill failing today in the House. We'll get into the details of why this fight really does matter.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Good afternoon to you. It is 3:35 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Andy Biggs is here at 4:30. He's on the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees involved in yesterday's impeachment inquiry. We'll ask him about that and also this big spending fight going on in Congress. More on that in a moment. Mike Van Meter is here at 5 o'clock, a candidate for Virginia State Senate in an important race. And E.J. Antoni, our in-house economist, joins us at 5:30. We'll take a closer look at this spending fight, and you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The Republicans can't get on the same page on what kind of legislation they should pass as it relates to spending, which is what led to the headlines today breaking that the House has failed to pass what they call a stopgap funding bill to avoid a government shutdown. This would be to sustain our currently unsustainable levels of spending for a little while longer while they continue to work out something that they should have worked out months ago. Why did this drag out to the bloody end again? Remember, Kevin McCarthy becomes Speaker of the House on the idea and on the promise that he would responsibly handle the spending bills in the United States House. And obviously, it's not a one-man show. It's not just the Speaker of the House's job. He's got to corral all of these members and get them to support legislation. But the idea was that they were going to do 12 individual spending bills that the public could see, full transparency, and not save everything to the last minute. And the incentives for saving it for the last minute are almost always corruption. It's almost always, and probably it is always, corruption in the sense that you're cramming all of it into the world's shortest possible timeline. You give the public no time to litigate the contents of the package. All of the special interests who are interested in trying to get more money to their organizations have their hands in our pockets. And then you get a monstrosity like we got last year in the form of that omnibus bill at the end of the year, the one that Kevin McCarthy was objecting to. McCarthy was saying, wait a second, involve the House. The Republicans are about to take over. Involve us. The American people expect that. McConnell gave McCarthy the finger and said, nope, you're not involved in this. We'll just work it out over here. The Democrats and Mitch McConnell, they worked out a gigantic, gargantuan, massive omnibus spending bill. They slammed it through the Congress. And Republicans were cut out. So McCarthy gets elected on the idea that he's going to fight back against this. And where are we? Well, we're up against it now, aren't we? Let me quote from my colleagues at the Daily Caller today. The House of Representatives failed to pass a continuing resolution negotiated between conservative and moderate House Republicans in an effort to avoid a government shutdown. The Spending Reduction and Border Security Act was introduced by Representative Byron Donalds of Florida on September 18th. That would be 11 days ago. Following negotiations between the conservative House Freedom Caucus and centrist Main Street Caucus, as a compromise between divided factions of the House Republican Conference to achieve unanimity while avoiding a government shutdown. The bill failed the House by a vote of 198 yeas to 232 nays, with all Democrats voting against the bill. That seems like an important point. Let me reflect on that for a moment. All these Democrats, what have they been telling you for weeks now? And they, in fact, they used the impeachment hearing yesterday to try and make this point over and over. Republicans are shutting down the government. This bill was only designed to continue to, quote, fund the government until October 31st. It was essentially to stretch out the negotiating period. Why did Democrats vote against it? If it's so important, if it is so critical, if it is existential that our government continues to operate as it has been, why didn't Democrats support it today? They voted against it. The answer is political utility. They want a shutdown. The Democrats do. And they want to blame Republicans. And they want the public to buy that message and to think that there's something catastrophic going on. This is what they desire. So Democrats voted against the bill today. The bill would fund the government until October 31st. It would cut public spending by 8.1285%, chump change, according to the bill's text. This would yield $1.59 trillion for 1 month until the House and Senate passed 12 appropriations bills to provide permanent funding for the 2024 fiscal year. Much of the bill does not relate to appropriations, but to immigration law enforcement and border security. House conservatives insisted upon those measures as a condition for approving the continuing resolution. This is what Kevin McCarthy has been trying to say. Well, it gives money to law enforcement and border security. Wait a second. Stop. Biden is not going to do any of this. You can put anything you want in a piece of legislation. Guess what currently exists in law? You don't even have to pass it. Illegal immigration, illegal aliens are not supposed to be in here. They're not supposed to be crossing our border. What is the Biden administration doing with that? They're letting it collapse, the whole thing. But this is McCarthy's play, was to say, well, this is about getting control of our immigration system. It's not going to happen. Biden is letting it fail on purpose. But you can control the spending here. Congressional Democrats and President Joe Biden have staunchly opposed such immigration policy provisions, the Daily Caller says. Those provisions include the construction of a border wall along the United States international border with Mexico that was begun during the Trump administration, and bans the U.S. Border Patrol from processing the entry of illegal immigrants who don't enter the country at a designated port of entry, which would preclude beginning the asylum application process. The bill also bans the Department of Homeland Security from funding non-governmental organizations that provide relief to illegal immigrants or assist them in entering the country unlawfully. Okay, I love this component. I have to say, So to credit to the bill authors on this particular thing, the human trafficking that's going on at our expense, that's how it's being done. These non-governmental organizations, Catholic Charities and others, who are receiving untold sums of money from the American taxpayer, are trafficking human beings deep into our country. And that needs to be defunded. That's like priority one. So that is a good inclusion in this. And whatever the final package looks like, that should definitely be included. As well as bans the use of the CBP-1 mobile application. This allows people essentially to play a shell game with the Biden administration. The Biden administration is trafficking people into the country and then saying they're not illegal immigrants, or as they say, undocumented. It's ridiculous. They're giving them ID cards. How can you say they're undocumented? They're using CBP-1. They're using an app. And then we bring them in. Before they even reach the border, we are processing their asylum claims. The bill does not explicitly mention any funding for Ukraine during its war against Russia, which has been a controversial issue during the appropriations process that has divided the House Republican Conference. On Thursday night, 117 members of the conference voted to preclude the bill from funding Ukraine, while 101 members voted to maintain such funding, which Democrats support. The Biden administration issued a statement Friday staunchly opposing the bill. That's the bill that just failed today in the House, claiming that its cuts to public spending are too severe, and it indicated that President Joe Biden will veto the bill if it is presented to him, which means it's unlikely to be passed by the Democratic-led Senate either. Okay, so this is a showpiece. This was not even going to pass the Senate. So the Republicans who voted against this were right on a number of ways. One of them was just the obvious that this isn't going anywhere, so what are you doing? But two, what is actually radical here? What's the radical position to take? Is it radical to keep on spending and to destroy our great country with an out-of-control government? Is that the radical thing? Or is the radical thing to put the government in timeout for a few days? I don't think those options seem close, do you? I think the radical thing is we are in $33 trillion in debt. Americans cannot afford their lifestyles. For the first time in decades, bankruptcies are climbing aggressively. Credit card debt is now over $1 trillion. 60 to 70% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And those incomes are not making ends meet, which is why they're going into that credit card debt. We have a government that is spending completely out of control. I love all these debates about, like, what are we going to do to save Social Security? Nothing is going to be there for us. Nothing. Social Security or otherwise. Because that's how out of control this government is. Why can't anyone do anything to bring it under control? And why can't people keep their promises? Look, I get that Republicans are fighting amongst themselves here, and there's worry. There's a lot of worry about what does this look like politically. But at what point do we get control of this? Because to me, the radical thing is destroying our country. That's the radical thing. Matt Gaetz has been a ringleader on trying to stop all of this and try to get 12 sensible appropriations bills through the House. Here's what he had to say. He was on News Nation earlier this week. That's a cable channel. Chris Cuomo has ended up there. You remember him from CNN. Here's Chris Cuomo asking Matt Gaetz about this fight. Cuomo suggesting, well, isn't what you're doing a little crazy? I think Gaetz does a pretty decent job explaining what's happening here.
Conceptually, I get it. I think anything that you could do that would reduce profligate spending in the eyes of the Americans, things that are spent too much on things that matter too little, would be well met. But how you do it matters. You do not have the time to do what you want to do right now.
That's on purpose,
and you may well put us into shutdown. But if you do that, you know you are the face of the shutdown, and nobody likes that.
Listen, I want to be the face of returning this country to a fiscal path of sanity. And what I know is that this is not a bug of the system. It is a feature. they purposefully wait until the very end, and then they use shutdown politics to make the representatives agree to a framework in which you're just taking one up or down vote on everything from veterans to our troops to the Department of Education and the Department of Labor.
So what Gates is describing is actually what's happening, and it happens every year. It's the reason why we never have regular order when it comes to passing spending bills. It's always at the very last minute, continuing resolutions, omnibus spending bills. We have no time. Please fund everything. It's a scam. They create a sense of urgency in order to rob you blind. They allowed this to drag on up until the bloody end. Now we're looking at, we've got 36 hours until the government shuts down. And the government doesn't shut down. There are all sorts of things that continue, to include Social Security checks. I love that lie. They keep saying, the Social Security checks might not show up. That's a lie. That's a lie. And so Gates is saying, at what point do we fight here? At what point do we call this out for what it is? Like, Cuomo said, well, you're going to be the face of the shutdown. There's no time. You've got to support keeping the government running. Gates is saying this is the whole point. That they drove us up against this wall on purpose. So who's going to put a stop to it?
Not a serious way to do this. And the reason I know it is not a fantasy, it is not unreasonable to do single subject spending bills. That's exactly how most of our states operate. They set a top-line budget number, and then they have bills pursuant to that top-line number. Now, Kevin McCarthy's problem is he made multiple contradictory promises to different groups of people. He promised House conservatives one number, then he went and made a deal with Joe Biden at a different number, and then he told House appropriators to mark to a different number altogether. And so that has created the confusion that drove us to this moment. Now, we will have to deal with that and why our leadership put us in that position. But the answer isn't to revert to the muscle memory of continuing resolutions. The answer is to do what we're endeavoring upon this week. Put 4 individual bills on the floor. Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Agriculture, State and Foreign Ops. It's about 73% of the discretionary budget. And I don't like the fact that there might be a shutdown over the weekend or for a few days as we try to get the rest of the work completed. But I think that's what it's going to take.
Look, I get it, but this isn't a test in law school. They're never going to get through the Senate, and we're going to have a shutdown, and then everybody loses except maybe your faction by making McCarthy look bad. But you know all the different things that happen in a shutdown. You know that there's only one rating agency left that hasn't punished the American borrowing mechanisms.
Why? Why, though? Why have the rating agencies been punishing the United States government for its borrowing? Because of the out-of-control spending. Chris Cuomo's making the case for reining this in, unwittingly perhaps. And when he says, why do you want these bills? They're not going to make it through the Senate, he says. Well, this is where the politics comes in that works to the Republican advantage. If Republicans get together and actually pass this legislation in a timely manner, actual spending bills that aren't full of pork, aren't full of special interests, aren't jammed up against at the last second, don't look frenzied, panic, chaotic. If they look like they're organized and rational and responsible, if they had passed this months ago, then Democrats would be owning all of this right now. If they didn't want to pass it through the Senate, that's on them. And then you can run the political campaign against them. Guess who's shutting it all down? Guess who's making it so federal employees are furloughed and federal contractors might not even get paid? Guess who? Guess who? Guess who? You could be dominating this conversation right now. Instead, Republicans allowed this to go up until the freaking end of the clock. And so what are we supposed to do with this? God bless the guys who are fighting back against it. Somebody's got to call it out. Force everybody into an uncomfortable position, force them to the table, and pass rational spending bills here. John's in Fairfax. He's calling in on line 1. John, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. How you doing? Thanks for taking my call. Hey, I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, but I can't remember the last time we passed a budget. And also, why does the Congress keep getting paid if the government shut down? I mean, I think that 90% of our country probably doesn't mind if the government shuts down because they're so dysfunctional anyway. So maybe it's good that they go, like you said, in the timeout for a little bit.
Yeah. Just put them in timeout. Look, I realize in our area, John, it is a different environment for a lot of our listeners because they are connected to the federal government in some way, federal contractors, federal employees. And I'm not pretending for a moment that it's an easy thing to have to deal with a furlough or not getting a paycheck if you're a federal contractor. I don't want to pretend for a moment that that's the case. But as a basic point, if you want your grandchildren to have a future in this country, you've got to be responsible about the way you administer it. It is the most obvious thing in the world. And these guys keep trying to pull the wool over our eyes. The reason they slam this up until the final moment is to rob us blind. And I don't know about you, John, but I'm sick of that.
I am too. I mean, I served in the Navy for 20 years, and I saw it up front, close and personal. And I hear you. I mean, they just get into this habitual way of doing business, and it's just they don't care. It's just they don't care. It's just throw more onto the American people. And I think you're right. People are getting tired of it. Absolutely.
Amen. All right. Thank you, John. I appreciate the call. You're right about that. Congress keeps getting paid. Isn't that nice? You know, the insider arrangement that they have. It is now 3:52. And I should tell you, we do have E.J. Antoni coming up later in the show. He's at 5:30. We'll talk about the economics of all of this. And Congressman Andy Biggs at 4:30 about what is going on inside the halls of Congress right now.
Know the news the minute you wake up. O'Connor and Company with Larry O'Connor. 5 to 9 a.m. on WMAL.
Well, we've got another big hour ahead. We've got to talk about some more of the crime issues in America caused by the left and George Soros, of course. Also, the border remains wide open, and everybody knows it, to the point that you have illegal immigrants fist bumping the Border Patrol as they walk in. What's that about? And the military also trying to stop the Navy SEALs from using, quote, performance-enhancing drugs. There's a lot to get to. All ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.